Good evening and welcome to the Norwood Board of Selectmen's meeting for May 7th, 2019. Tonight's meeting, is being recorded and archived by Norwood Community Media for future presentation. Tonight we're going to start with an executive session at 6:30 p.m. and at the conclusion of the executive session we'll come out and go into our regular business. So could I have a motion please for an executive session?
Motion to go into executive session at 6:30.
Have a second?
For the purpose of collective bargaining in the fire department?
Correct. We're going in to talk about collective bargaining regarding the fire department. Mr. Baloney?
Aye.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Plasko?
Yes.
Mr. Hajar?
Yes.
And I vote yes also. So we'll be going dark for a little bit, but we'll be back at approximately 7 o'clock. Thank you all. Good evening. We have completed our executive session and we're back into regular session. So to begin with tonight, I'd like to do a pledge of allegiance to the flag, as always, with a moment of silent reflection or prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. I want to start by apologizing to the general public. We got rather tied up on that executive session, but it was very pertinent. We did. We've got a lot accomplished, I believe. So tonight we're going to start with an appointment with Chief William Brooks of the Police Department. Chief, how are you this evening?
Very well, thank you.
Would you like to address us with your monthly report, please?
Yes, I would like to. It's actually been kind of a busy time. I think when I was here before, I talked about this being a busy month for police training. And so the Massachusetts Juvenile Police Officers Association held their annual conference at the Sheraton Four Points at the beginning of the month and towards the end of the month. I believe the 8th annual cybercrime conference hosted by the Massachusetts Attorney General was held at the Sheraton. Both I and the Honor Guard participated in opening ceremony, so it was their largest conference yet. I should mention that the dispatch center remodeling is underway and the replacement of the cabinetry and the infrastructure on both the police and the fire sides. So that's underway, so if people walk into the police station, there's like a large barren room in front of them. The dispatchers are really right around the corner. There is an alarm on the door, so they know that somebody has stepped to the counter, and the dispatcher will come right around the corner and greet them. But we just ask for the public's patience during this approximately 3-week period when this area is updated. I think the public is probably also aware that the Public Safety Gym was dedicated as a result of donations from Ernie Bach Jr., and I know several members of the board were able to make it that day. I think I've told you before, I've been appointed to an advisory board for the FBI that advises the Bureau on their criminal justice information systems, the information systems maintained by the FBI. So I spent a few days in Clarksburg, West Virginia this month, working on both the Index, which is the National Data Exchange, and the Bureau's new National Use of Force Data Collection Project. 4 members of the Police Department participated in Career Interest Day. Deputy Chief Kelly, Officer Melanie Wigmore, and Officer Paul Murphy and I, as well as 2 members of the Massachusetts State Police, addressed 3 different classes of high school students who were interested in law enforcement careers. As I think you're probably all aware, the police department conducted our entrance exam. We give an exam every other spring. We had 172 people come, 190 had registered. We had 172 that morning. And so we wish all of those applicants well. Coming up this month is this is our annual firearms training evolution. We train in firearms year-round, really, in a number of different ways, but this month, every sworn member of the department will spend an entire day at an outdoor range, and we fire for qualification purposes. Obviously, we also fire, as Mr. Bishop is aware, we fire moving forward, we fire moving back, we fire officers laying down, we fire offhanded, with cover, without cover, prone position, from inside a car, using a car as cover, all manner of firearms training is conducted. and the officers really have a very full day when they're out there, and that has begun. Bike Safety Day is Saturday the 18th. We ask people to keep that in the back of their mind. They can come to the parking lot behind Norwood Bank. Both Norwood Bank and the Bike Depot help us with that. So there will be technicians from the Bike Depot there to repair bikes. Our school resource officers will be on hand, as well as a few other members of the department. And Attorney David White from Boston, as he has done every year now for several years, donates several cases of bike helmets. So kids can just, all they have to do is come. They don't have to make any particular case if they don't have a bike helmet. We'll give a bike helmet to the kids who show up. They've got the law firm's logo on one side and the Norwood Police patch on the other, and they get a bike helmet for being there. And the last thing I want to mention, I don't know if I've mentioned it to you before, but both Norwood High School and Norwood Police Department are working on a project to collect up prom dresses and suits, for kids who are attending the senior prom. That can be an expensive undertaking, and Officer Jen Hoyle has stepped forward from the police department to work on that. Cindy from the high school, one of the vice principals, has stepped forward from the school side. I know they've collected a lot of dresses, shoes, men's suits, and that sort of thing, and they're now in the process of pairing those up with kids who could use that. And we also have a beautician who's offered to do a few girls' makeup, and we're in the process of getting that done as well. So the prom, we know, is the 17th, so that'll be going on next week, wrapping up that project, and we thank Officer Hoyle for working on that. I can answer any questions if you'd like.
Questions from the board? Mr. Maloney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief. Welcome again. One of the items in your report here, just maybe something for a PSA here. Officer Rooney met with an elderly woman who took a large amount of medication, who has a large amount of medication in her home, and he also spoke to several of the visiting nurses. We talk a little bit about here about securing medicine in the home, and particularly for the elderly who tend to have a lot of it. Can you talk a little bit about that situation and what people can do to ensure safety?
Certainly. Well, twice a year we participate in the Drug Enforcement Administration's Drug Take Back Day, which is a day that's kind of it's a national movement to get people to turn in their prescription drugs. And we do that, but quite frankly, we have a kiosk that's right in our lobby where people can come in. Our doors don't lock. They can come in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and drop off unwanted medications. No questions asked. They just drop them in the kiosk. It operates like a mailbox. They can come in at any time, and we really do encourage people to get rid of those old prescription meds. They do become a liability at some point in time, and there are other people, of course, family members, who have begun their path to addiction by experimenting with and then using, and later being addicted to prescription medications. So the short answer to your question is, at any time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they can just come to the lobby. It's right inside the door when they enter the lobby, and there's a drop box there. They just pull the handle down, empty their prescription medications into it. We pull those out on a regular basis, and then we have it all incinerated and destroyed.
Okay. And in the home, we talked a little bit about securing medications in the home. I mean, hide them, right? Is probably the best thing to do.
Well, yeah, that's another thought. As far as, I think that reference was probably to Officer Rooney suggesting that she secure her medications. In other words, figure out what she needs and what she doesn't, dispose of what she doesn't. There are lockable medicine cabinets, and those are more for people who might have somebody in the family with an addiction issue, or they might have kids, or they might have teenagers. So that's another thought too, that if you've got kind of that vulnerable population that might be in your household, or people dropping by to visit, it does make sense to secure those medications. I can also tell you that from time to time, and this hasn't happened in Norwood in quite a while, but it has happened in other jurisdictions, every now and then there'll be a real estate open house, and people will go to the medicine cabinet and pull some of those pill bottles. So people who have their home on the market, in addition to taking the jewelry and locking it up and taking any cash that they have in the bureau drawer and locking it up, would also suggest they do that with their prescription medications.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Mr. Hajar?
Thank you, Chief, for the report. As with many of the department heads in this town, very thorough, and it's great. Just I guess in the future, if we can put things in sort of context. When you're showing your April numbers, as I did with Chief Morris, to the right of that, can you put year-to-date numbers for these categories so we can see where we stand? And then to the right of that section, put corresponding last year numbers for that month and then year-to-date, so we can see how we're tracking.
You mean for...
So like you say, motor vehicles violations charge, 425 for the month of April. Next to that would be what would be the year-to-date, and I'm talking fiscal year-to-date. And then to the right of that, what would have been April of fiscal year 18 in the year-to-date number for that, so that we can see the numbers in context to last year, so we can sort of see, are we heading in the right direction? Are there some areas of concern? I really don't know, because don't have last year's number. So a great report.
So I could tell you, last month we wrote 347 violations, and for the month of April in 2018, we wrote 364 violations. So the 425 is an upward trend from this time last year.
Okay. On the report of the chief of police, I'm not sure what page it is, but out of the 11 events that you attended, 6 were outreach to our community, which I think is great. Over 50% of your time chose outreach directly to this community for different. I compliment you on that. That's great, and also I'm sure it's for many of your team members as well. I appreciate that, and I think that's good for the community. At the bottom of that page, it says detectives in the ABCC conducted liquor compliance checks on all liquor establishments in town. There were 6 violations. Are we getting any type of report about what those 6 violations were?
We have
Or
it
do we
already.
have that? What?
We have it.
Okay. Thank you. When we go on to the training, again, if we could have the monthly total in year-to-date, so we can see, and then what it is for the last year, beside that number, that would be helpful to me anyways. The school officer reports, outstanding and very detailed. Again, how is this compared to, I mean, there's a lot on here of what's going on. Are we tracking up? Are we tracking down? Are we just more comprehensively detailing what's going on? I get concerned, and the report doesn't alleviate any of my concern, but are we seeing increased volume of activity at the schools than in the past?
No, not particularly. The school resource officers, as you can see, report their activity in some detail, just so you can see what they've been up to. Quite frankly, a lot of this is difficult to quantify, that they took out a complaint, or that they addressed a class in a particular issue, or they worked with other officers, they attended a school safety conference. It's really just a monthly update. It's, quite frankly, a lot of that stuff is difficult to quantify. It's not so much a numbers mission that they're on.
No, but they're also very detailed about incidents that they had to take to Denver court or charge people after the fact for either fighting or assault and battery or Class B substance on the campus, et cetera, et cetera. So at some point, I don't know if we're tracking up or tracking down. It's hard to tell, but it's a very good detailed report. And that's it. Thank you very much, Chief. It's a very thorough report.
Thank you. If I could just backtrack on Mr. Hajar's comments about the liquor violations. At some point in time, we will have a hearing, and we will have 6 people or corporations or companies
Yes.
come before the board and explain why they didn't go by the rules and regulations. Correct?
Yes, correct.
And everybody will have the appropriate paperwork at the time.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Chief, thank you for your report.
Good seeing
All
you.
Thank you, Chief.
Have a good night.
Our second meeting tonight is with Chief Judge Maurice of the Norwood Fire Department. Chief Maurice, good evening.
Good evening.
And I'll turn it over to you and your monthly report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to start with that burning season has officially ended. It ended on May 1st. So we do not want anyone out there burning. And if we do find people or it's reported, we will respond to that location, extinguish the fire. As usual, we've been busy. The past few weeks, Norwood Fire responded to 2 mutual aid fires. The first one was in Westwood. We sent an engine company over there for a basement fire. I know it was extinguished fairly quickly, and our members were able to return. The second was actually last night, about 2:30 in the morning in Canton. They had an attic fire in a residence. Very stubborn fire. Was again, we sent an engine company over and myself, and it took us a while to get the fire fully extinguished. So, as you know, we're always sending the mutual aid system. We're sending Norwood Fire Department companies over to those communities to assist when their manpower may not actually cover the incident as to what they're having. Last week, Group 2 had a working fire at 140 Morgan Drive, which is Home Market Foods. There was a section of the exhaust ductwork of the actual unit that the town had talked with Home Market Foods about to get rid of.
Evacuation unit.
Exactly, get rid of the odor of the residents were complaining about. Surrounding this ductwork and the stack was insulation enclosed in basically an aluminum layer of metal. The insulation got saturated at a point with grease, which ignited under the heat, and it was basically a very labor-intensive fire for the firefighters on Group 2. They had to remove the outer layer of aluminum and then the actual insulation, but as soon as they pulled the insulation down and it was exposed to the air, it would just reignite. So it took them a while, but they did a great job. Home Market Foods is very responsive with us, that we addressed a number of issues with them. They've agreed to institute a couple measures that we think would assist them in preventing any types of fires that they may have. One is a CIP, which is a clean in place, which would be attached to each stack that they have coming out of the main building up to the roof line. And the other are thermocouples. And the thermocouples are basically, it's an automatic shut-off that when the thermocouple reaches a certain temperature on the ductwork, it automatically shuts down the oven or the exhaust oven.
Now, are they currently operating without that evacuation system, or are they not operating?
They're not operating. As of yesterday, they were not operating. We are in contact with them almost daily to see where they are at. And as I said, they've been very responsive and we've been working together with them.
Very good, thank you.
As Chief Brooks had mentioned, we are in the middle of the dispatch project. Basically, our main dispatch center was moved to the ship commander's room for a temporary location. Quite a bit was involved in moving all the different equipment that we had, phones, radios, things of that nature. I do want to thank the IT department, Sean Warnack, for assisting us with moving the computers so we didn't have to hire a third party to come and do it. And also the same with Dan Morrissey, Jason Haber, and Bobby Griffin from the light department. They were able to move both our digitizer and the controls for the traffic lights out in front of the station, which we didn't think we were going to be able to do. And it was very important to us because when the trucks back up, it's a safety feature, and they were able to do that. So that was a bonus to us, and I want to thank them for it. We've initiated spring cleaning in the building, so there'll be a lot of activity going on for the month. There'll be a lot of washing of lockers, floors, walls, waxing floors, things of that nature, and just trying to make sure that we get the building cleaned up. It's been a while, and we want to get rid of a lot of the dirt and the exhaust fumes that have accumulated on anything at the station. So spring cleaning has begun. To Mr. Howard's point at the last meeting, the CPR class, we did, in conjunction with Chief Brooks and the police department, set up a CPR course for the public. It's being spearheaded by Patrick McDonough from the fire department and Michael Benedetti from the police department. It's going to be May 18th at the community room at the public safety building. 30 people total, and I believe it's already full.
I think, yes, I checked with the dispatchers, and the other day it was 28, so you're probably got 30 by
Right,
today.
So for a
sure.
small fee, Mr. Howard, I think we can get you in.
No, I would take it if there was a space, but if there's no space, I'm happy that the people are.
But you'd have to serve food.
I don't know if we can do
Chief,
that. but-
both chiefs, thank you so much for that. That's wonderful.
So it was a great idea, good service to the people of the town for them to be able to
And there'll be
to learn
30
that
people
skill.
out there that hopefully will be certified after this, which could save a life.
Yes. And the last thing, I just want to congratulate the Brusades family. They won the St. Catherine's Rider Fire Truck to School auction. I know it's a great fundraiser that St. Catherine's does every year, and we were able to bring an engine up to the family on Surrey Road. Lieutenant John Cody drove. I was actually the passenger, and I know the kids had a great time. We took them through the town a little bit and right into the parking lot of the school, and we had the lights and sirens going, and the kids loved it.
Very good, very good.
And the same thing with Shane Perry. I don't want to exclude him. He's a fifth grader at the Oldham School. He won the school raffle, And we did the same thing, actually, Lieutenant Cody did for him, and they brought him to the Oldham School, and he absolutely loved it with a few of his friends.
Sure.
So we're always happy to do those community outreach things for people, and especially kids. So,
Very good.
and that's my report.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from the board? Mr. Hajar.
Yes, if I could- Yeah, thank you, Chief, especially for the updates you've made to the report. I appreciate it.
We're almost there
Almost there,
completely,
but...
we will get the training
That's
down.
right, thank you. On the new engine, it says worked on last minute details of design. Is it in production and you just tweaked it during production, you found something, or was it
It's the
something?
very beginnings of production, which would
Okay.
be the framework, but there's just a few issues that I know the new engine committee was working on. One of them specifically was a door, and it was facing the wrong way with the hinge. So they have to go over things like that on the blueprints and the design and make sure it's what exactly we want. So they were very minor changes that they were looking
Okay.
at.
A couple of lines down, when you talk about repair of certain parts of the building, whatever, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, anything major that needs to be brought to our attention? Or just,
Other than many of the issues I know you and I have discussed previously, but the building is aging. There's
I know.
no doubt about it.
I
It's
know.
15, 16 years old, and it gets a lot of use from both the police department and with the fire department. You have 15 men and women living there daily, so
Yeah.
a lot of wear.
Thank you. On the long-term absence, without getting into any specifics that we should know about, but is there an anticipated return date from this individual?
With that individual, if I'm assuming you're talking about one that's IOD, and he was sent for a IME, which is an independent medical exam.
Yep.
We're waiting to hear back on the results to see if that individual can return to work or if he would need to be retired by a disability. I know there wasn't just an issue, we just had to get some of the information to the IME doctor from the physical therapist.
Thank you. Looking at the overtime numbers, obviously so far so good. You're at minus 25 compared to last year, and the projection if you go through, you're still, you're doing good, which is good. On the other hand, the substitution, if we just even track close to the numbers for May and June of last year, we're going to be over the budget for this year. So
Correct.
is there anything that, I know this...
I work daily on that, and
Okay.
try to get people in all the time. People are using up earned time, whether it's maybe vacation, it may be personal. We do have the injury, and we do our best to keep people in. I know that there was a little bout of sickness that had gone around recently, so there was a few people that have been out sick, but I'm always on top of that and monitoring it, so we're doing the best we can on it.
All right. The numbers do look tough. I mean, we increased that budget line item by over 46,000, and yet we're projected to be over. So it is a concern. I'm glad you're paying attention, and I appreciate it. On the next page, where you talk about ambulance fees and revenues, all good numbers through 9 months. You're up over 12% at the bottom line of what our new revenues are. So looks like you're holding good on that. Just one line, if you could, it says total refunds due patients through March. Last year there was $0. I don't have the year to date. So what typically is that involved that we're returning money back? What?
It could be a senior citizen that maybe was billed, and because they're a senior citizen, we won't charge them
Gotcha.
for the ambulance fee.
Okay.
Something of that nature.
When you give the update on all the activities regarding different project statuses, does welding require a fire department detail in a
Not
construction
always, it
site?
depends on the circumstances.
And that's a decision made by you or the vendor?
The deputy chief of the department.
If he
And
knows
he
about
would
if
work-
he knows about it.
Correct.
So
I mean,
do we
people
ha-
should be coming to the fire department to get a
Right.
welding
So
permit.
that's my
They
point.
shouldn't
Do
be
we
welding without one.
So do we say that up front on the constructions that any welding needs to receive a permit unless otherwise authorized by the deputy chief or whomever? We say that right at the beginning.
I believe so. And I think it has to do also with being in communication with the building department.
Okay. What's the penalty if they don't do it? They were supposed to have one, or they didn't tell you?
That I do not know, but I could find that out for you.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And that's it for me. Thank you for the detailed report, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Jarrett. Anybody else? Mr. Maloney,
Yeah,
sir.
thank you. Just a question for my colleagues. I think, didn't we appropriate additional money for substitution at the special town meeting?
We did, yes.
Okay, that's not included in the 735, yeah, okay, I think it was 90, was it 95,000? Okay, thank you. No, everything's been covered. I do see and notice a significant uptick in year-to-date net revenues on the ambulance. I don't know whether you call that good or bad, or, you know, but good financially, but maybe bad in other ways. But anyway, other than that, thank you very much, Chief, a good report, and I too appreciate the additional data, financial data. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Mr. Plasko.
Thanks.
Please.
Chief,
Yes.
mutual aid, wonderful thing. We help each other out for the communities wherever it's needed.
Yes.
But I'm wondering from a dollars and cents business perspective, are we taken advantage of because of our geographical location? In other words, is there something in the agreements between the towns that it ends up they all call us, or
No,
like Westwood
no.
call Walpole instead of us?
The way it normally works with many towns, it depends on what side of the geographic location of the town as to who will be responding for mutual aid. And those agreements have been worked out for years with the surrounding towns. It's not as if that if we have something, say, over on University Ave, that we're going to be calling Dover for it, unless it goes to, you know, an extreme. But we would be contacting the community, and sensibly, that would be closest to it, which would be Canton or Westwood, who have access to that location. But there's nothing that anyone's taking advantage of, I believe, within.
I notice
those
we seem to
agreements.
have more runs. Of course, I don't know what their runs are, but it just seems like we go more often.
Well, just for instance, the fire at 140 Morgan Drive went to a working fire, so but I don't put this in my report, but Walpole Fire sent an engine over mutual aid to us to assist. So that's always going on.
Okay, it's, like I say, it's a great thing. I just want to make sure, because of our geographical location, somehow we didn't take the lion's share of it, because beyond responding, which is the immediate goal to help each other out, usually if you've emptied out the firehouse, you call people in, and there's some additional costs going on there. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plasko. Mr. Howard, did you have something?
Evening, Chief. I think on that subject, I think if we looked at the numbers, we'd see we take more than we give.
Could be, 'cause we're-
I think it leans that way. I've looked a few times and compared, but
If you look at the numbers
Yeah.
as to how many responses Norwood Fire does
Yeah.
compared to the other towns,
Yeah.
we're much higher, so
Yeah.
you would think that it would trend that way,
oh, yeah.
possibly.
The following thought has come up before, and I throw it out again, because substitution has already risen from special town meeting. If we were to hire X more firefighters, would that solve this problem?
Temporarily.
Can I point something out? The answer is no, for a couple of reasons. The benefit cost we pay in terms of the OPEB, the liability, the health insurance, and the pension far exceeds what we would see as savings in overtime. It's also important to remember, so overtime has no legacy cost. We also don't pay a pension on overtime. So financially, it actually makes more sense in certain cases, unless you're seeing a stress to the workforce, to actually pay out that overtime, then hire somebody to cover it, because we're going to bring somebody in at a $60,000 salary. They're going to get a $20,000 health plan on top of that, $12,000 to $15,000 in pension benefits. When they retire, we could end up paying $250,000 in retiree health care. So dollar for dollar, that almost never works out, at least for us.
Yeah, I think that's what came up previously,
The benefit cost.
Similar type stuff, and and nothing towards the people, but it's frustrating. Yeah, you know, I mean, certainly you can't fault a person for if they're sick to take their sick time, and everybody's entitled to take their vacation time, you know, within reason, which I know that you people do that. You know, you don't let every single person go to the main months, so I understand.
As I said at special town meeting, I think there were a lot of circumstances that contributed to that substitution.
Oh, it always
With
does.
injury.
No, but it's just the way it is.
You're supporting a member that was overseas in the military,
Oh, yeah.
things of that
Yeah,
nature.
It is, yes. Thank you, Chief, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Anything else from the board?
Thank you.
Chief, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you, Chief.
We have a 7:30 appointment, which is obviously later than it should be, with Sigal Reese from the Impact Norwood Coalition to give us a summary.
Good evening, thank you.
Good evening. Aubrey, would you just introduce yourself for the people at home, because a lot of people don't know Aubrey.
Yes, sure. So my name is Aubrey Seal, and I'm the program director for Impact Norwood.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. I was actually going to do that, so I'll get right over to Aubrey now. He's
Okay.
going to lead us off, and then I'll come in at the end and wrap
All
it up.
right. So I'm going to tell a little story just to put prevention into context and the work that we do. I promise it won't take long. But one afternoon, two fishermen went down to a river, and they were having a lovely day. They were fishing, and all of a sudden they saw some people floating down the river yelling for help. So they immediately jumped in, pulled the people to shore, and the people from the village heard all the commotion, so they came out and they were helping the people who had been seen floating down the river. And as they were helping the people who they'd taken out, more people were seen coming down the river. So the people from the village kept jumping in, they kept pulling people out, and this went on for about an hour. And then, amidst all the commotion, one of the original fishermen was seen walking up the river, and that really upset a lot of the people in the village because they were thinking, look at all these people coming down the river, we need to help them, we need to save them. So they kept doing what they were doing, and a little while later, slowly people stopped coming down the river. And about an hour and a half after that, nobody was coming down the river anymore. And at that time, they saw the fishermen who had walked away come back to the village. And they went up to him and they said, why did you leave us? We were really upset. We needed you here to help us. And he said, well, I thought someone should go upstream, up the river, to find out why so many people were coming down the river. And it turns out that the bridge in the community was broken, and there were no signs letting people know that there were broken slats. So people were trying to cross this bridge and they were falling through. So they put up a sign warning people, and that stopped some people from crossing, but people still tried to go through. And when that didn't work completely, they found some people to repair the bridge. So how does this relate to what we do? I like to think of the bridge in that story as our community. And when all of the slats of the bridge are put together and working together to solve a problem, then people can get from one part of their life to another part of their life safely. And in the story, the fisherman is Impact Norwood. I think the fisherman that went up to upstream, that is our coalition, and that is what we do. We want to stop a problem before it starts, and we do that by engaging all parts of the community. We work really closely with law enforcement, schools, media, local government, just to name a few. So that's my little soapbox prevention in context spiel. And prevention is really important, especially for youth in our community, because they're at a time in their lives when their brains are like a pot of simmering water. And when substances are added to that pot, it can make it boil over and turn into a bigger problem than just a simmering pot of water. And young people and people in general are bombarded with seeing substances everywhere. You turn on a TV show, someone's drinking a glass of wine. You go to a convenience store and you see really appealing flavors of tobacco. So why wouldn't you want to try that? And when the community works together to change policies around that help reduce exposure, availability, and access to those products for youth, we can turn down the heat on that simmering pot of water so it doesn't boil over into a bigger problem. So I like to say that we're all responsible as a community to help keep our youth substance-free and safe and get across that bridge. So that's prevention and why it matters, and I'm just going to go over a couple of things that Impact Norwood has done recently that I think are really exciting. Some of you may have seen downstairs in the basement level the photo voice gallery. Those photos depict what substance use looks like in the community through the eyes of youth. So all of those photos were taken, titled, and described by youth. Some Norwood High School students, along with students from Dedham, Westwood, and Needham, participated in the Photo Voice project last summer. So that was really exciting. And some students from the youth Impact Norwood Coalition, which has just started to get up and running, are now taking photos of the things in the community that keep them safe. Because in prevention work, it's also important to focus on the positive and not just the negative. So that's one exciting project we've worked on. Last weekend, Impact Norwood helped out at the Earth Day celebration. So during trash pickup, everybody who participated, they were asked to keep anything related to substances separate, so we could then see which part or which areas of the community produced more substance-related trash than other parts of the community. And now we're going to do some more digging and try to find out why there's more trash related to substances in some areas than others. So that can help us target some of our efforts to hopefully reduce substance use in certain parts of the community. And lastly, in conjunction with a regional collaborative that Impact Norwood is part of, the Substance Abuse Prevention Collaborative, with Dedham, Needham, and Westwood. Biannually, we offer free tips trainings to local liquor establishments. And it's really beneficial, and we know that it's beneficial. After every training, participants are given a survey and they give us feedback. And I'm just going to read two of the quotes that I thought were really powerful. One participant said, "I think tips training should be mandatory for anyone selling or serving alcohol." And part of the Youth Photo Voice project last summer, one of the youth actually said, "I think people who work in liquor stores should be better trained." And that coming from a youth, I think is really impactful. No pun intended. So one way to make it easier for businesses to get tips training, Officer or Chief Brooks is sending 3 officers, and I'm being sent by the Public Health Department to be trained as tips trainers. So it's more sustainable for the community and can be done more cost effectively for our businesses.
One of the things we
So-
want to look at a later date, not tonight, is this board wants to look at the possibility of having every licensee in town have mandatory tips training throughout their personal environments.
Perfect. That's great. So that's the end of my spiel. I'm going to turn it over to Sigal now.
That's actually a perfect segue. So some of the things I wanted to talk about was how policy can work to change the environment for youth in our community. And building on what Aubrey said, that we all have sort of responsibility to create a healthy community for all our residents, including adolescents and young adults. And use of tobacco and nicotine products and alcohol can be harmful during adolescence. As Aubrey said, the analogy of the pot of boiling water. The adolescent brain has a lot going on, and we want to work as a community to help turn down the heat on that pot. And substances turn up the heat. So developing good policy can help turn down that heat. One thing that the Board of Health is working on is restricting access to smoke accessories, which we would include in that vaping products such as Juul and other e-cigarette products. So one thing that this board can do is support the Board of Health as we approach a new policy to restrict that to adult-only facilities. We've done that already with all the flavored products, flavored tobacco, flavored e-cigarettes. So it's kind of cutting edge. The city of Framingham has done something similar, but many communities haven't taken this step yet, but I think it's very progressive of NORD to be looking at this. We know about the rates of juuling, and it's increasing, and we want to kind of be ahead of it. So I'd ask this board to support the work that the Board of Health is doing with that policy work to restrict it to adult-only facilities. Those draft regulations will be presented at the board meeting 2 weeks from today, actually on the 21st. Again, just in draft form, something the board is looking at to create policy, again, to turn down that heat on the boiling pot. Other things, besides supporting the work of the Board of Health, you talked, like you just explained, working on responsible beverage training is wonderful. It's another way, again, to turn down that heat. And then also work to monitor the ever-changing marijuana industry. That's something where at the state level it's changing, I feel like routinely, and the environment around the marijuana industry, both medical and retail adult use is changing constantly, so being aware of that. And I hope that this is the start of a conversation that we can see as a community, both boards and Impact NORD and the 3 entities working together to, again, create an environment, turn down the heat for our adolescents and young adults around substance use.
Thank you. Mr. Howard, do you have a question?
Yes, vaping compared to smoking. Some people try to stop smoking and go to vaping. What's your thoughts?
Well, a lot of our focus is around youth access, and what we're actually seeing is youth will start with an e-cigarette and then transition to traditional tobacco. So traditional tobacco with use is very low. And I think public health and as a community, as a nation, we've done a really good job at lowering the rates of traditional tobacco smoking. But we're seeing a huge spike in the e-cigarettes and the nicotine products. That unfortunately, we don't know the results. A lot of that is not regulated, so we don't know what youth are ingesting into their lungs. And like I said, it does lead to more future tobacco use. So our target is really around youth access.
No, I understand that, but I'm looking for your thoughts on people who are vaping instead of smoking cigarettes.
As adults.
Is that a good thing? Either way. Either way.
Yeah, I would say.
Meaning, does vaping contain less nicotine or whatever than cigarettes do?
Nicotine, no. There are different chemicals in vaping products than in tobacco products. You don't
Okay.
have tar, you don't have some of the other cancer-causing agents in tobacco products. There are actually higher levels of nicotine in something like a Juul product, so it's more addictive.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm
Okay.
getting at.
Yes, it is
So,
addictive.
meaning that they're trying to stop, but in effect, they're using more.
Yeah, and it isn't approved by FDA as a cessation product. There's the patch, there's nicotine gum, there's things that have gone through the process and gotten approval as cessation. A lot of Juul is marketed as a cessation product, meaning that it's
Right.
there to stop you from smoking tobacco. But in essence, why are you marketing to people that don't smoke in the first place, such as youth, young adults?
Right. Thank you very much.
And to,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you, Mr. Howard. And to continue on, some of these vaping products have flavors again. They have mint and mango and menthol and that, which makes it all the easier for young people. According to a report on WBUR Boston Radio this morning, in the year 2017 to the year 2018, there was a 77% increase in the uses of vaping products. Many of those were young people. And now I know it's transitioned to another level where you could actually put THC, the intoxicating chemical in marijuana, into a vaping product and ingest the vapors of the THC. So I think there's a 30% increase in, if you're currently using vaping products, there is a report out there that said more than 30% of those people will automatically go to cigarettes when they're old enough to buy cigarettes. Many people, according to this report this morning in WVUR, have been addicted. I interviewed a young man who was totally addicted to vaping products, but he can't get off of them because he needs the help with, say, some of these cessation products that are on the market. But you have to be, I think, 18 to buy those.
Yeah, and you would need a
So
prescription.
he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. He's 17, but can't get the help by going to a local pharmacy and getting a cessation product.
Yeah, I mean, you would need to get physician care for that. He
So
has an addiction.
I
chemical
personally think
addiction.
vaping is becoming a major issue, not just in Norwood, but across the country also. To the point, I think Somerville Board of Health has already shut it down in the town of Somerville, e-cigarettes and so on. And I think the town of Dover locally has done something to stop the sale of those products also. And I know you want to talk about what we're doing here in Norwood.
Yeah, so a lot of communities, so we call it the two levels of the flavor ban. There have been a flavor restriction that most communities, over 50% of them right now in Massachusetts have, which is a basic flavor ban, everything but mint and menthol. Mint and menthol was excluded from the ban because of some lawsuits. But right now, Somerville and Needham went ahead and banned it. Somerville did get a lawsuit. Really, it's about procedure, not
Correct.
so much of content. Needham has not received any lawsuits, and since then, probably a dozen communities are in the process of restricting the mint and menthol flavor ban. So that's all products, both tobacco and nicotine juuling type of products. That's one thing that will be included in the next revision of the Board of Health that we're looking at. But sort of that next step is restricting all accessory items, including vapors and e-cigarettes, to adult-only facilities. So you wouldn't be able to see it in a convenience store. You wouldn't be able to see it in any stores. We would restrict it to and cap the adult-only stores to two adult-only tobacco stores within the community.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Mr.
Well,
Hajar.
I just want to compliment the group. As a member myself, I encourage adults to be involved. Impact Norwood meets once a month. It's a great organization with a lot of ideas and activities going on, especially to encourage the youth. One thing I know that, Aubrey, you had a survey done that was completed last fall of all schools, middle school and high schools, I believe. And the percentage of the youth that were doing vaping, I think, was greater than 30%. What was it?
In the high school, if I remember correctly, it was about 34% indicated that they used it currently. And I don't remember what the numbers were in the middle
So
school.
a high percentage for youth that doesn't bode well for as they become adults and get used to it. So,
Not at all.
I think as both of them have said, while we can appreciate trying to help the adults, they're making the decisions. We really need to tackle it at the youth level as hard as we can to prevent their use when they become adults and going forward so they can understand. So keep up the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Just one question
Mr.
on the
Maloney.
data. By the way, that was a very good presentation. Was that a true story?
Of course.
You say that the data shows that traditional tobacco use is low, has gone down considerably. Yet at the same time, you say that vaping leads to traditional tobacco use. Therefore, wouldn't it hold that we would see traditional tobacco use going up?
Talking about high school use data. So
Okay.
it might go up later in life,
Okay.
which
so-
we have less data on. But we have reports that kids start on Juul and then transfer to traditional tobacco.
And
So we will see a
how
rise.
old is the data? I mean,
It's actually the youth survey that we were just talking about. So it's high school kids. And
no,
we-
but I mean, I just want to know what to anticipate in the next few years. Then it would hold logically that we should see high school. I think you mean kids, people who get to college age and older, start to smoke tobacco.
Yes, we will start to see a spike in tobacco
Okay,
use.
so we will, but we haven't seen it yet.
Not locally.
Okay, because we haven't run the data long enough.
Right.
Right.
Probably to see it. Okay, very good. And in Somerville and Needham, you mentioned that the ban is on flavors, right? It's restricting the sale of vaping products to mint and menthol.
It went that second step in the flavor ban to go ahead and ban mint and menthol, again, to adult-only facilities.
Okay,
So it's essentially a ban, but they do allow it in adult-only facilities.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from the manager?
No, sir.
Anything else, ladies,
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank
for the
you.
update? Okay, let us get down to a new business if we can. Oh, I'm sorry, we have one more appointment. Mr. McDonough and Mr. McQuaid, from the town government. The reason we asked you to come in this evening, both of you, is because there's been a lot of rumors out there about what exactly is this tax levy increase going to cost us if the June 3rd election passes, the override, and how it would affect us financially. So could you start off with that, Mr. McQuaid?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here. I did read an article in the paper, just see if I can find it, that was a letter to the editor, and someone stated that because of the override, our taxes would go up 52% by 5 years, and that in fact it would go up by 100% over a 10-year period. So being a numbers guy, I kind of looked at it and said, you know, what's the real numbers here? After a 5-year period with the override, the average taxpayer's bill would be up 22.06. So in the newspaper it said 52%. At the end of a 10-year period, it would be up 38%. In the newspaper it said it would be up 100%. So I'm not sure where that writer got those figures, but they were way off. So, and then just if you want to think about right now, an average tax bill is $4,900, and you know, year one of the override, that's the big bump, $389.
Year one.
Year one for the average taxpayer, and then in year two, that figure would become $398 instead of $389. So in other words, in year two, there'd be, because of the 2.5% increase on everyone's taxes, there'd be an additional $9.73. So I think I've heard some people in town think, It's going up to 389, and then it's going, on top of that, it's some other big figure, but the increase after that is 2.5%, just like your normal tax bill.
Thank you, sir. Any comments on that, Mr. McDevitt?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could, thank you for having me in this evening. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I think it's important to present it this evening in light of that letter last week. I'm getting overwhelmed with calls, and people are very nervous and concerned about the override. A lot of senior citizens want to know what the impact is, how it's going to affect them. So I think it's very important for the board, and especially for my board, to be very transparent. We're public servants. I want to give the public all the information they can, absorb, so that they know what's going on. So I did a quick, if it's okay, if I could present this, Mr. Chairman, to the board. And
Thank you, sir.
thank you. And it's not very long. It's a lot of information that you've received prior, and you usually get it every year at the tax levy hearing.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Mr. Boudreau if he could bring up the first slide for the presentation. Okay, so this is just an introduction. This is what we're here this evening, just to figure out tax levy information and how it's going to affect the override. The next slide, page 2, okay, is a 10-year historical tax levy analysis. So I went back and pulled all the information that we have every year we set taxes, and it shows you that the total tax levy, average annual increase has been 4.5% over that time frame. Okay. The next slide, Brian, please. Slide 3 shows the Norwood total tax levy history. Okay, total tax levy plus the increase into percentage of the increase over that same time frame. That shows the 10-year average at 4.5%. Okay, next slide, Brian. Now, you all are very familiar with the tip of shifting some of the burden from the residential to the commercial. So the tax rate shift tip factor towards the commercial, industrial, and personal property taxpayers, that reduces the average annual increase to the residential taxpayers. And the board has always saw fit to do that. The next slide shows a 10-year history of what that shift has been. Back in 2009, it was 1.50. It's gone down, but you'll see in the last few years, it has gone up from 1.53 as recently as 2016 to 1.61, which is admirable because the board is trying to help the residential taxpayers while not overburdening
Keeping a
the
balance.
commercial. So if you go to the next slide, is again just a historical of the tax rate history. And you'll see, like this year, for example, well, this is last year's, but it's the commercial property taxes are basically twice what the residential is. Okay, so they're picking up their burden, but that's how we've been able to keep the average residential tax bill at a reasonable rate. The next slide is just as a result of the tip factor, the 10-year historical tax, okay? So where all property taxes without a tip were 4.5%. After you do the tip, the residential taxpayer is getting a 3.8% on average increase per year. And I can stop if there's any questions, Mr. Chairman, but I can probably get through it and then.
Can I?
Yep.
Mr. Howard?
Thank you. Therefore, do we apply the 3.8 to the increase in, playing the devil's advocate here.
Yep,
Do we apply the 3.8 to the increase in your taxes each year instead of 2.5%?
well, yeah, and that's, I'm gonna get to that if you, it's one
Thank
more
you.
slide up.
Thank
So,
you.
the next slide, Brian, is a history of the residential tax bill changes over that same time frame, 10-year period. You know, the first year they went up 177, then 159. They've gone up and down, and that depends upon so many different factors. It depends upon the economy, it depends upon what the town meeting has allocated, and it also depends upon what's been in the levy. So the average, you know, the only way you can really get it, because some people are saying, well, how much is my taxes gonna go up? And I can only tell them that the average is gonna be up 3.8%. So if you look at the next slide. So I wanted to do a test to make sure that my information was correct. So I took three specific tax bills and analyzed them over a 10-year period. I took a single family, a multifamily, and a much younger, newer construction. And after analyzing a 10-year tax increase, the specific average was 3.7%. Now, if you go to the next slide, Brian, those are the three properties, Dorset Street, Wheelock Ave, and Manhattan Street. The first one is the single-family home, which on average went up 4.2% per year over that 10-year period. The two-family went up on average 3.7% over that period. And the newer construction, okay, went up on average 3.3%. So when you average those three out, you come up with the 3.7, roughly the 3.8 that I referred to earlier. And you might say, why would the higher end tax be lower percentage? Because they're paying a bigger burden of the shift. So the projected, next slide, Brian, is the projected impact of a 5.95 override, $5.95 million override on the average residential taxpayer. And I think this is to emphasize again, this is just for next fiscal year. We're not looking beyond that. We know already that the average property value increases 3.8%. Next year is going to be an anomaly if the override is successful. On the
Mr.
next,
Judd, do you have excuse me, do you have a question?
No.
Okay.
okay, so the next slide, Brian, kind of goes back to answer your question, Mr. Howard. Okay, so we have the tax levy for this year at $75,550,066. Okay, the increase was a 3.6%. Again, coming close to that level of 3.8. Okay, in fiscal year 20, okay, you're going to take the fiscal year 19 property levy, you're going to add in 2.5%, okay, which we do every year. So that equals the $1,841,419. You also have to add in new growth, because that's going to be added to the levy. And we've projected that on average, new growth has grown approximately $900,000 every year. And there is a slide that's after this that will show that. So between the 2.5% and the 900,000 new growth comes out to 3.8%. Again, that magic 3.8 comes back. The only anomaly this year is that you have the potential for an override. So that potential override of $5,950,000, okay, added to the levy, would be approximately 8%. So between the new growth and the 2.5%, you have 4, basically, and then you add in 8, so it's about a 12% estimated increase for 1 year, just next year. Okay, on the next slide, Brian, it says the projected impact of a $5.95 million override on the average residential taxpayer. Fiscal year 2020 plus the next 5 and 10 years. Right? Next slide. And my point is, you know, it really comes down to, I can throw all kinds of figures out, but the average taxpayer wants to know how is it gonna affect me? How much are my taxes going up as a result if we didn't have an override or if we did have an override? So this slide here shows you the projected increases over the next 5 years. These numbers are pretty similar to what Mr. McQuaid gave. They didn't break it down by increase per year, but it does say, you know, on average, the first year, yeah, there is a bump of the override, you know, the $389. But after that, it kind of returns to the 3.8% and projects out 3.8%, as has been historically there for the last several years. So that slide shows you roughly what the taxes increase will be per year. And as I said, the anomaly is just going to be this first year with the override. After that, things return to the 2.5% plus new growth, whatever is there. The next slide, Brian, goes back to prove the point of what the average new growth is. And these numbers come right from the Department of Revenue. Every year, when I come in with my tax package, these are the numbers that show where average increases in new growth have been. Now, there was an anomaly 2 years ago. Part of that was because of benchmark becoming on, as well as Upland Woods came on the tax roll at 100%. And we also had 2 new car dealerships down on Route 1, Herb Chambers, Lexus, and I can't remember the other one.
Volvo and
Yep.
Mercedes, or
Volvo,
Yeah.
Lincoln.
Mercury.
So there was an anomaly, but if you break it down, like I say, and that's what I'm trying to just show, the average is, if you took that $900,000 figure, you could feel comfortable with that. There may be an increase this year. Avalon Bay won't come on board basically till next year. But we also have a lot of condos that are being constructed down on Endicott Street. You might have the Regal Press property next year. But even on the Avalon Bay, I'm going to attempt to get some of that growth, because even though it's not 100% complete, it's going to be what is on that property as of June 30th. So if I already have my people going out there, if it's 50% complete, we're going to pick that up. So that's going to be added to the new growth. Now, plus, in addition to all the condos at Endicott Street and any other properties that have come online. So that's going to help, you know, down the road.
That won't necessarily increase that 900,000 number, though, because in that 900,000 number, you had big things like you said, Upland Woods and so
Yeah.
forth. So they're one time, they've already happened.
Well, that's why.
You need big items like that to come on again.
Yeah, well, that's why, those 2 years are the anomalies.
Yep.
They went up, the reds, okay? So if you take the other years and
Yes.
average them out, then it is 900,000, is your
Right.
average.
Right,
it
but I'm
could
saying
go
you
up.
need big things like that to happen every year
Exactly.
to keep up that.
Well, yeah, exactly, and we've got Moderna, which is gonna be coming on, even though they have a TIF.
Yeah.
And hopefully the fourth dimension is gonna be developed in some time, and that's gonna be
That'll
new
probably be
growth.
4 to
Yeah.
5 years out, yeah.
Yeah, but, so it
Well,
does go up
fully,
and, yeah,
fully.
but it does go up and down, and I just wanted to give kind of a history of what it might be. And I think we all know that the average tax bill as a result of the, not tax bill, the average increase is $389. I mean, I've seen those figures put out by the Budget Balancing Committee, and I think that's pretty accurate to use that.
I think one of the misconceptions is, so the average taxpayer, as a result of the override, next year their tax bill, if it passes, will go up $389. It doesn't then the following year go up another $389.
So as Mr.
And then
McQuaid showed, it goes up $10.
Right, and then another $389.
That was
So
one of the misinformations that was out there.
that I've heard from several people, and that is not the case. So next year, as related to the override, $389 is what it goes up, and then the cost of that override goes up by about $9 to $10 a year after that. It is in perpetuity, but it doesn't go up $389, and then next year another $389, and then another $389. every year unless you pass an override every single year. And the point about new growth is well taken. That new growth is paid for by the new additions to the tax base. So if that new growth number actually goes up higher than you project, the average taxpayer actually pays less because there's more
Correct.
people paying the tax bill, because the tax base, and remember that the levy is divided by the base, actually grows. So if you had a year where you did really good new growth, if we had $2 million, then that basically eats away at what you'd otherwise be raising taxes. You're
Right,
spreading
and
the
there
tax
appears to be
burden.
plenty of new growth on the horizon coming towards us at some point in time.
We're doing well, and hopefully there's more coming, but that's the impact of the new growth, is the more new growth you have, the less everyone else pays, because the burden is being shared by new construction.
Correct. Thank you. Mr.
Mr.
Jacques.
Chairman, so
In
that is the end of,
I want to say that, and I think we've talked about this, is that there is the distinction between the tax levy amount and the actual taxes that are going to be raised, largely dependent on new growth, potential new growth. So, I mean, it's not an automatic, because as new growth increases on a particular year, the tax rate
Can fluctuate.
would be less, because you don't have to tax all the way up to the levy amount. So I don't want,
Yep.
I mean, I think a lot of us are saying that that's a big fundamental goal of ours, is to, what can we do to increase the commercial tax base, which would then allow us to keep the tax rate for the residents lower. So
Correct.
I agree with your averages, and the numbers that you've shown are right, but I think as a board, we're trying to say to the taxpayer is, we're going to work real hard to increase that commercial tax base, which in the future then lowers the residential tax rate. So while you're going to see it for the first year, let's hope that some of these come into play in year 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6,
Correct.
and down the road, so that we can make it better than what we're projecting right now, because right now we're just using averages, whereas now we can look at maybe some actuals with regard to some of the commercial base, and then we can keep it lower. So yeah, I commend the both of you for making that distinction and dispelling the bad numbers that are out there.
Yeah, I think it's important that you gentlemen came in, both your numbers basically were very close. Shows the people real numbers they can get a handle on, instead of reading things that just aren't true. We wanted to have a later override, so there'd be time for people to get questions out and questions answered. It's certainly not helpful if that information's not accurate, and then we have to spend time correcting it, but that's the process. Get information out. People might honestly have figured that's how it works. They didn't realize it doesn't. We get a chance to explain that, and then in the end, people can make their choice what they think is the right way to go for the community. And, you know, we have taken a pledge, all three major boards, to operate in a certain manner for at least the next 5 years. If we're able to get new growth, if we're able to get sources of revenue that we haven't anticipated in our 5-year projection, then we actually won't have to raise the taxes as high, because we're not going to build the budgets any higher than we've pledged to for 5 years. So that, you know, that can definitely help to actually lower these numbers on a given year, like the additional $9.73 and $9.97. Those numbers conceivably could be less.
Exactly.
That's not a promise, but people have to understand there's a lot at play here. And it depends on what we have to actually appropriate. The override raises the ceiling limit for us, but it's only town meeting appropriation that actually spends it and determines what the tax rate will be. So we don't necessarily have to go to the top if we could come up with other sources of revenue.
Yeah, one figure that I think is worth pointing out, so year one, the tax bill for the average home goes up $389. And again, that's based on the statistical average home price of $452,000. Year 5, as a result of the override, your tax bill is $430 higher. So you're talking about a fairly small delta between the first year and the 5th year of the override. It's adding about $10 per year after the first year. So it's important that that number is clear to folks.
I think it's also important to note, too, and I'm repeating myself, but for instance, there's already talk out there about 2 new restaurants that haven't even been built yet coming online at some point in time over the next 3 to 5 years, I would imagine. And again, we talked about Avalon and the small complex across the street from Avalon, the condo complex. So there's many things in the future that may help to reduce some of that impact to the residential families.
Or,
Sure,
or at the very least, allow us to extend that projected 5-year period to a much longer period before we have to consider anything again, and the town's,
So we do have things to look forward to. It's not like we have nothing in the horizon. We have things on the horizon.
Well, it's important to note, and Tim mentioned this, if you look back at the growth over the last 10 or 15 years in the tax levy and what you would be going out the next 10 to 15 years, after the first year of the override, the numbers are roughly exactly the same. And the tax levy as a percentage of the tax base has actually been slightly on the decline and is actually smaller than it was several years ago. Part of the reason, you'll notice one of the slides we showed, is that the tax rate was actually lower about 5 years ago than it is today. Now, your individual value, of course, could change, but our numbers in terms of where our tax growth is, we're projecting the tax growth, isn't really any different over the next 10 years after that override first year.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions, Tim, if I could. First of all, is there a way we could get this presentation online that people could refer to it?
Yeah, I'm sure we can.
There may be people out there that want to see this stuff rather than.
Yep, I can check with IT and see if they can do it. And I'll have copies, like I said, in my office. This is the information that if Alan Howard came in tomorrow and said, I want to know what the average tax bill is going to be, and I want to know how it's going to affect my bill, I could hand them this and say, here it is. I do it now anyways, but I thought it was important in light of that letter to come here and explain to the board, you know, exactly how, you all know it, but the average taxpayer, it's very complicated, you know, to try and figure this out. It's got so many different factors to it, but, you know, you gentlemen are very smart, and you pick up on it right away. But I have a lot of angry taxpayers who are, you know, they're demanding answers, and you're right, I think that's a great idea, Mr. Howard. I'll try and get that posted on the town website. Yeah.
The other thing is, this is the $64 question, okay? What calendar date, if the override passes, will the tax bills be going out with that increase on them?
I've already been asked that, and I think we're looking at July 1, right?
Of this year?
August, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause it goes out in
Is
four
it
quarters.
July 1 of this year and not a later?
Well,
date?
the
First quarter of the
first
fiscal
quarter.
year.
And that was one of the concerns from some people that had called me. I forget, maybe it was Mr. Plasko, I'm not sure. But
It was.
we didn't want to hit the taxpayer with a huge third and fourth quarter increase. So I spoke with our billing company, and I said, can we add that 5.95 million starting with the first quarter bill? And he said yes. So I think that
So
if it does pass, I think that'll take out some of the sticker shock.
That's the period that ends September 30th.
Yeah.
And
I
then
think
what,
that
they have a
makes
month
sense
to pay it
do
or
it that
something?
way. Yeah.
So it'll be the third calendar quarter of 2019, and it will be on that bill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tax bills up to August 1st.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I
Thank
just
you.
want to add one more thing. I want to compliment the planning department and town meeting for taking the action they did recently on Article 5 to change the downtown zoning, because I personally think over the next 20 years, that's going to help to transform the downtown, and it will add considerable new growth in a community that's already built up. So, you know, if the override passes, that will help to extend, you know, hopefully the length on which that override will last. And even if the override doesn't pass, eventually it'll help us.
Sure.
Help us do. Either way, it was good foresight from the town. I think it's one of the transformational votes that will really help.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a terrific presentation, gentlemen. Thank you very much. The data is, it's really good data. I'm glad we made it public. You're stepping into the breach. Really, one way to think of it, Mr. McDonough, is with a roughly 11.8% increase in year one, it's kind of like Prop 2.5 over the next 3 years compressed into 1 year.
Yep.
Basically, you were looking at 3.8 per year for roughly.
Yeah.
You've compared. The process remains the same thereafter. It's Prop
Correct.
2.5. I said it a couple weeks ago. I'm a big fan of Prop 2.5 because I remember what it was like in the state before Prop 2.5. But one thing it does do is it forces towns to compete for new growth. I mean, new growth is a big factor. Like Mr. Mizuko said, you get a lot of new growth. That's actually really good for the residential taxpayer. And so we compete for it. Towns that don't want to compete can raise their, they can't raise their taxes only so much and they decline. So, I mean, I like it, and I like the emphasis on means of, ways and means of increasing new growth. The downtown MUOD was one, Mr. McQuaid, and maybe in the future we'll be looking at Route 1, which would be many times bigger, I think, potentially. In terms of the windfall. And then getting back to the new growth, you were right, and I'm glad this is sort of a sobering analysis, but you're basically right. I mean, if you want to figure what's new growth, even $900,000, most years it's actually come in under $900,000 in this period. We had a couple of really big up years. So we're looking for the up years in new growth. That'll be helpful. I mean, we can't count on state aid, and departmental receipts will be what they'll be. Utility receipts will be what they are, but development of the town is the way to go. So I think it's a terrific presentation. Very clarifies a lot of things. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. McDonough, just for everybody's edification, you and I will be going to the senior center on May 23rd, I believe.
They may keep you there.
Well, that's true. They haven't got to that point yet. And we're going to explain to the seniors there how they could possibly get circuit breaker money.
Yep.
Circuit breaker money that might be available to them. We're trying to find ways to help the senior community bring it down a little bit.
And that's what I'm getting phone calls on that, Mr. Chairman, every day. How can I, whether it's the work-off program,
Right.
The over 70 exemption, whether it's the senior circuit breaker, people are worried, and they want...
And rightly so.
They want to know how they can, they're worried about how they're gonna pay their bills. So once we've told them what their bills might be, yes, and that's an important part to help our seniors. How are they gonna be able to, help take care of some of the burden of that increase?
And we will give them all those options when we get there.
Yep.
Are you
So,
familiar at all with the an additional tax break for, I think they call it a widower's deduction? Widowers?
The town has never applied for that.
No, we haven't. I think based on up at the senior center.
Yeah.
I was two different discussions up there, and that's come up. And if we're looking to make everything potentially available, then we might want to look into just what that takes and put it on a fall town meeting warrant.
One item I do want to draw to the board's attention, we are looking at for a fall town meeting. The state allows us to have an option for the senior tax work-off to allow somebody to work for a senior if that senior
Right.
is physically unable
could be a
to
grandchild, for
work.
instance.
Correct, or it could be somebody who's otherwise volunteering. So we do have to separately adopt that as a local option. We're going to have that on assuming we have a special town meeting in the fall, which I believe we'll have that on there. So that's another item that we're adding that will help seniors who may be homebound, who may be physically handicapped and can't actually participate in the senior work-off program. That'll actually expand the number of folks who can do that.
and that's good. We're going to try to find as many options as we can for the elderly community to get their number down a little bit if we can do that. So I thank both you gentlemen for your
Thank you, Mr.
presentation.
Chairman. And
It's very
Mr. Boudreau, I
informative.
want to thank you. That last slide just says that we're at the end. So, I appreciate your time and dedication. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you again. All right, gentlemen, if we can get into new business, I'd like to start with item number 1. Mary Lou Folin, Town Clerk, submitting June 3rd, 2019 special town election warrant for signature of the board. And that, of course, is the override. Have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to sign. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Selectman Hajar, would you mind if I took that and brought it to the bottom of the list?
Absolutely, no problem.
So we can move to some of this other stuff. Item number 3, car wash. Norwood High School field hockey team looking to have a car wash on Saturday, July 13th, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., and I imagine that's across the street from the Norwood Recreation Department in the parking lot.
Motion approved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? All
Aye.
opposed? Unanimous. Number 4, Patricia Monahan, 24 Railroad Avenue, submitting interest in being appointed to the Taxation Aid Committee.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I wonder if we could table that. Looking at it on its surface, her background and her interests is probably very pertinent, but we really just got this going. I know, speaking just for myself, I don't yet know enough about how that committee works, and so that we can properly decide who in fact should be on it. So
Correct.
maybe we could table it until we have further discussions on that committee.
And that's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second and a motion. All in favor? All opposed? Unanimous. and I think she is very well qualified. She currently works with the Norwood Senior Center, working with seniors on a daily basis. So that will be held off to a later date. Number 5, Superintendent Travis Farley, Recreation Department, requesting 2 items. Number 1, submitting request to close Washington Street from Giles Street to Manhattan Street, East Cottage Street from Washington to Central Streets, and Day Street from Washington to Central Street on Saturday, September 7th, 2019, from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the annual Norwood Day event.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. All in
Second.
favor? Opposed? Unanimous? Number 2, Travis Farley submitting notification that Mike Lodge, president of Girls Youth Lacrosse, was able to secure a $50,000 donation from Del Brooks, JKS, and Turner Brothers Concrete for the installation of a quote-unquote bang wall. He is requesting the board accept this donation and approve the location of the bang wall.
Chairman?
Sir,
I was again, I hate to keep suggesting tabling things, but just saying this over the weekend, and I don't have a problem with the idea of us installing a bang wall. I've seen it in use over in Medfield.
you want to
and-
define it for us if you could?
Well, it's
Some people don't know.
just basically just a big concrete wall that lacrosse players, tennis players bounce the
that's
ball
all.
off and back to them so they can practice. I actually, when I walk my dog by the Oldham School, there's a young man who does it off the wall of the school. But my concern is the suggested location. That spot was intended to be a tennis court relocation if a hockey rink was to come. I've been involved in the hockey rink discussions, and I've become very pessimistic that there's any chance that will ever happen. But there was also certain votes taken of the legislature and so forth, and I'm not really sure legally if there's anything we have to be concerned with. I wouldn't want to locate this bang wall right in the middle of where the tennis courts might someday go, and, be in the way and have to possibly be torn down. I just think we should look into it a little and make sure this is the proper spot for it.
All right, currently we're talking about the track up in the far
Right.
corner behind the baseball
Right, the
field.
10th of a mile track.
Correct.
And that's right now, it's not even level, it's got banked ends for running and everything. So, to just put it up in the center of the grass area that's there and make it flat and put in a tar or cement floor and the bang wall is probably pretty simple and easy to do. But that's not really down by where the lacrosse players and other tennis people are. It's kind of up out of the way. But more importantly than that discussion might be, are we sure we can use this site without taking some other remedial legislative type action first? And I just think we should check out the legalities of it, that's all.
Send it to the manager.
Sure.
Second.
On the motion, sir?
On the motion, I'd also like to expand that discussion about the land where the potential rink may go, since we have a deal basically lined up with the 3 rinks that are being built already. And do we even want to entertain having the state build a rink that we have no control over? That was not, Mr. Chairman, the intent of the original vote taken on the reason why a lot of people supported it. So I hope we can have an open discussion about that as well, because I think Bill's right. Before we decide, is that the right spot for it? I'd like to talk about why we even entertaining a rink in South Norwood anymore.
Well, I think that's another reason I suggested what I did. I think there's actually some legislative votes that have been taken specific to that property. I don't know if they go away
So
or if
what
they're
I'll
there
do-
and we have to have a vote taken to get rid of them.
What I'll do is clarify whether or not there's any legal concerns over using that particular spot of land. The youth lacrosse, the rec department, and the school have all agreed to this spot, so it works for all the stakeholders. We'll just run it by town council to make sure there's no other steps that need to be taken to use that land. If the board separately wants to discuss rinks, that I think is, as Mr. Plasko mentioned, a separate issue from just making sure we get our
Well,
bang wall.
It's kind of connected, because if there's any potential whatsoever that the tennis courts are going to come down or East going to go, then the tennis courts were tied in by both town meeting vote and I think the legislature, that they get moved because it was state money originally that contributed to those tennis courts.
We'll find out if there's any legal reasons we couldn't use the proposed site for the
All
white wall.
right. Again, I don't have any strong opposition. I just want to make sure we do it right and don't overlook something. Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion and a second
To table, is that what
to
it is?
table
And have the
and turn it
manager
over
look
to the
into
general
the...
manager. But on that motion, is this something we should be accepting, this donation tonight? There's $50,000
Well-
out there.
We might have to return it if we don't build it.
We should have something by next week for the board.
Okay, all right. I have a motion to put it off for another week. And I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, unanimous. Next item is cemetery deeds for signature and approval.
Motion to sign?
Second?
All in favor, all opposed, unanimous. Number 7, Patrick Moore from Comcast submitting notice of quarterly franchise fee payment for January through March 2019 in the amount of $46,697.64. This has been sent to the Node Community Media.
Information?
Information, second.
All in favor, all opposed, unanimous. Mr. Hajar, you're up.
Okay, so after the votes taken at special town meeting regarding the moratorium on the open lot storage, and the whole issue about Route 1 zoning, we were talking about trying to get that underway and what was the best way to do it. And talking to Paul Halkiotis, Ernie, and Tony, we thought at first, let's just put together a working group to agree on what the process in the planning should be, because while the two issues are related, they are separate. I mean, I think the planning board's gonna take the lead on the Route 1 zoning, but they definitely want input from others as well. So we're proposing that we have 6 folks on this working group of someone from the Board of Selectmen, someone from the planning board, Tony, someone from the ZBA, Paul Elkios, and the building inspector. Those 6 to work, and at some point then we'd come back with something a little bit more specific regarding each one. But at least let's get it underway and talk about this. And how
That's
we
just to
want
talk
proceed.
about process and how
Yes.
the whole thing's going to move forward.
Yes.
Yeah, so what's our process to approach? Because again, there's the open lot storage issue, but we know that it's tied into rezoning Route 1. There's going to need to be a lot of stakeholder engagement. We're going to need to have some public sort of visioning sessions on what the potential benefits are for Route 1. We need to look at how quickly we can get a corridor study done. There may be some funding available to get a corridor study done. So just a working group to sort of figure out what the process is going to be and then kick that process off. Once it gets into the details of actually writing the zoning ordinance for Route 1, however that works out, the planning board will really take that portion of it, but there's a lot more to start the process before we get there.
Which
Mr.
would
Plasko?
include the dealerships.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I either missed something in what you were saying, or we've taken these out of order. We talking about the Route 1 zoning, or are we talking about the open lot storage?
They really need to be
Combining the
discussed
two of them.
in
In one working group at first, and then let the working group decide how each one should be dealt with, that's all.
what we-
So will this group report to this board or
It's
not?
just really an informal staff working group with some elected officials that would figure out what's our process for approaching the issue and the stakeholder engagement.
I view the open lot differently. I don't think that necessarily has to wait for what happens on Route 1. We started to look into how to set that up locally and what fees we might charge or not. We looked into Foxborough, Brookline, Cambridge, and so forth, and got some information. And we stopped, rightfully or wrongfully. The history is we stopped because Mr. Halkiotis, the planning board, was planning to take a article to town meeting to actually broaden, in my layman's terms, broaden the areas in town that could actually lease space. So somebody who has a business and they need 100 spaces, but they have 150, they might lease those 50 to car dealers to park their cars, and we would charge them. They'd be using that for open lot storage, and we would charge them. And we stopped because they were doing that bylaw, and we wanted to make sure, they decided not to go forward. And while they're working on that, like I think you were suggesting, that they shouldn't be done in isolation. They should be talk to each other about them and make sure perhaps there's reference in any bylaw to the town's open lot storage policy and practices. But that was for lots of, and that's why we stopped. And then one thing happened, another thing happened, then they started looking at downtown, and it kind of ended up taking a backseat that maybe it didn't need to, because in my view, it's separate. We have lots all over town now. And, you know, we've got a moratorium on, but they already exist. There'll be other things coming forward in the town, the skating club events, whether they're going to be part of our policy for parking fees or not. So I don't know that we couldn't
Well, we're not suggesting.
do that at the
Right,
same
no.
time.
To Bill's point, we're not suggesting that they both be done at the same time and come. One's going to be speedier than the other, we know that.
Correct. We have a one-year moratorium, the other one may take
We know
longer
that
than a
Route
year.
1 zoning is going to take a lot more in-depth involvement by many.
Probably at least a year.
Right, but the open lot storage won't. But there needs to be some back and forth to ensure that we're not doing something.
So you want that same group to look at the open lot
I
storage?
think to start the process, because what you
just
don't
to
want to
start
do is
the
come up
process.
with a series of regulations and rules related to open lot storage, and then you're looking at a zoning ordinance that may fundamentally change that issue. I mean, maybe you're able to take that open lot storage and put it onto Route 1 as opposed to it being out in some of the other parts of town, which is really what we don't like. So I just think at least to start, one working group can start working down there. You
It's
may
exactly
need
what it is.
You may need 2 selectmen to go off
But we
and say,
already
well,
have lots all over town that have been approved. By
correct.
the planning board and/or the zoning board.
Correct. I just don't think we want to spend time coming up with regulations that we may then want to change.
It's a starting point.
Yeah, I just think that's
I mean,
something.
I don't think they're gonna sit down after 3 nights and have rules and regulations. They just wanna bang this around and get some
It has
ideas.
to come before this board anyway, Bill, so.
Is that it, Mr. Hajar?
Yes, it is.
All right, that is the completion of our new business.
Are we going to take
Well,
any
yeah.
action? He's got a
Right.
request.
Are we gonna take an action? You wanna take an
Well,
action tonight?
Motion to endorse the concept of a working group to try to get the ball rolling on the Route 1 zoning matter that was recently a town meeting, and to appoint Mr. Hajar to represent the board.
Second.
This is specifically related to open lot storage.
Open lot storage and the Route 1 zoning.
And the Route 1, but
It's-
primarily open
It's
lot
not
right
working
now.
on the zoning, as I understand it, that zoning will eventually be the matter of the planning board, but this group's going to say,
This is how we're going to.
what's the process, how are we going to get public input, how are we going to get input from the principals that are on Route 1, and just set up a whole process.
Good.
Is that correct?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
I have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That brings us to a manager's update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One item, I do have a late request to the board. We've received a request from New England Locations for permission to shoot a commercial this coming Friday, weather permitting, at the Norwood Theater. We've worked with their principal, Jeff McLean, on several occasions in the past on both movie and commercial shoots in town, both in the center and elsewhere. He is working with Susan Lewis at the theater, and what they're seeking permission for, that I would ask the board for permission for, is one, to use sidewalks on both sides of Central Street in front of and opposite of the theater, from Manhattan to Cottage Street, to close Central Street as needed in that area, but not full-time, to restrict parking on this section of Central Street and on the town common sides of Cottage and Manhattan for equipment and trucks, and permission to park other vehicles in the Talbot and theater lots. The board, I do believe, has a map. If they don't, I can get you a copy of the map. They're looking to begin shooting this Friday. It was just a late request that we popped up as a location to do it. They are required to have details with the police department and the public works if necessary for traffic issues. They have to work with the abutters. It's for just a short, less than 1 minute commercial, and the town does receive a $1,500 permit as a result of.
And we have done things like this in the past.
Quite a
in
bit. This is
different areas
actually
around town,
much
so
smaller
it's not
scale
new.
than we usually.
Is this on the theater? Is that the commercial? or-
Yeah, I don't know if they want to do it right in front or in the
No,
physical
but
property,
is
but.
it a commercial?
Oh,
for the
no,
theater?
no.
No, they're just using it as a backdrop.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion approved.
Second?
I have a motion to approve the request, and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, unanimous.
And one other item, the Budget Balancing Committee is hosting 2 override information sessions. One is this Thursday at 7 PM in the GSU Lecture Hall at the high school, and the other one is this Saturday at 9:30 AM at the GSU Lecture Hall at the high school. So those are 2 Budget Balancing Committee override information sessions. So the tax impact will come up then as well.
Very good, sir, thank you. We talked about that last week, but I think it's important to bring it up again. Selectmen's agenda, Mr. Hajar.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I want to wish a happy Mother's Day to every mother in Norwood and mothers who reside out of town for residents of Norwood. I think it's important. I would like to offer an anonymous poem to them that was said many, many years ago. I said a Mother's Day prayer for you to thank the Lord above for blessing me with a lifetime of your tender-hearted love. I thank God for the caring you've shown me through the years, for the closeness we've enjoyed in time of laughter and of tears. And so I thank you from the heart for all you've done for me, and I bless the Lord for giving me the best mother there could be. So I wish all of you a happy Mother's Day. Second, just going through, I know we got the Beacon this week, and again, talking to our state rep. Chapter 90, the bond bill, looks like it's not going to be a multi-year thing. Looks like it was reported out again that it's a 1 year, 200 million, and not the multi-year 300 million that the MMA was pushing. We talked about it before, but there was another vote taken, so I think that's probably a done deal for this year unless the Senate does something differently. And based on email just received, looks like that is not changed. Didn't know if folks know that the MAA reported that the state is probably going to support a ban on single-use plastic bags. At a hearing, the MMA supported it, that there are 100 communities in the state that have a ban and that they want to extend it to 351 cities and towns across the state. And it's getting a lot of support, not just from the MMA, but a lot of environmental groups. So don't be surprised if that comes up and then comes our way. Probably should, for Tony's sake, have the HR look at the FML leave guidance. There was something that came out from the federal government regarding, I don't know, a little bit of a change than what our policy may have. It read differently than what I can remember from being on the personnel board, so it might be worth them taking a look at it. Didn't know if we are submitting an application for any recycling grants. They're due June 12th.
We always do every year.
Okay, that's awesome. My last one, it was a very interesting article about shared services amongst towns. People might be interested. I'm not saying that we would do it, but it's interesting how that seems to be a growing action regarding a whole list of services that towns get together on. Want to remind everybody this Saturday, May 11th, is our Town Spring Household Hazardous Waste and Recycling Day from 8 to 11. It's our rain or shine, so no leaf or brush disposal. And I'd like to put on the agenda a discussion about an RFP for water rights of Buckmaster Pond as a way of generating additional income. We're not using it. It's clean water. If the board doesn't want to sell it for other reasons, at least we could put it out and see what potential income we might get for leasing it for a period of years.
Okay, in several weeks you'll come back with a proposal to us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Plasko?
Thank you. One question. We have the problem on Dean Street where the culvert or the bridge, whatever we call it, has collapsed, and we have a detour there. We got a grant, we got town meeting approval to fix it. We're gonna have the signage go out to bid, not gonna be till the fall. We put up barriers, direct traffic, because that was the fast, safe thing to do, but is that the best we can do temporarily?
We can take a look.
In other words, is it possible to put metal plates down, or is the span too big? Maybe the answer is what we're doing is the best we can do, but I would think if there's some way we get rid of that detour in the meantime, it might be worth doing.
We'll absolutely take a look and see what we can do.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Mr. Howard, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to also say Happy Mother's Day mainly to the mother of my 3 sons, and but more than that, to all mothers out there this weekend. Have a great time, hopefully. I'd like to say my kudos to the DPW, specifically at our recycle center each Saturday. These fellas that we have out there, Mr. Manager, are incredible. Absolutely incredible how they help everybody up there, directing them where to send things that they have to leave there each Saturday. They just are incredible up there, absolutely incredible. Please pass that on for me, if you will. They're just so great up there. I haven't been up there in a while, and I kind of went to the back of my mind how good these fellas are up there.
We certainly appreciate hearing that.
The other thing, I always have a tag along. So
I should have waited.
is there? I've heard this from several folks out there. is there any chance that, say, on Wednesdays, we could manage to have 4 hours up there possibly? Could you just look at that and see if that could be a possibility each week or every other week or whatever?
We'll get you a cost analysis.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. So this one, it's prom time, as you know, this time of year. Well, here is a story. I have to get above the logo if I can. The students of our high school, the high school student council came up with this idea for the seniors to have a senior citizens prom. A week from this Saturday, May 18th, from 1 to 3 at the senior center. It's a neat thing. Everybody's going to get dressed up very nice, I'm told, and bring their favorite person and have a great time up there. I think it's just incredible that not only do we have a great time each year with the high school students at Student Government Day, then the kids come back and want to do this for the seniors. It's just a great thing. Last thing I have, this Saturday is the annual Norwood Sportsman's Club fishing derby up on Nickel Street for kids 15 and under. The Sportsman's Club has been having fishing derbies, folks, since 1955. The club has been around since 1921 up there, right next to the KSC. But the fishing derby is this Saturday from 9 to 11 in the morning, and it's geared only for the kids to have a great, memorable time for $2, folks. They're going to get way more than that in benefits up there with food and a gift for every fishing person. I encourage you to have your kids or the grandkids, 15 and under, come up 9 to 11 this Saturday. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. And if I could just touch on that before I go to Mr. Maloney, we talked about the landfill, but it will be closed for normal business this Saturday, because this Saturday, if you recall, is going to be Hazardous Waste Day, which will be from 8 a.m. till 11 p.m. I'm sorry, well, don't you wish. 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., and then we'll close at that time for all business. So, Mr. Maloney, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A reminder to town meeting members that our annual town meeting convenes this coming Monday, May 13th at 7:30 at Norwood High School. Secondly, a reminder, Lee Leach will be hosting 2 Carillon Tower tours, May 8th and 9th, so that's tomorrow and Thursday night from 5 to 7 p.m. We mentioned this last week, but Lee asked me to repeat it, okay? Carillon Tower Tours, very impressive structure here at our town hall. So if you're interested in that, 5 to 7 p.m. with Lee Leach, who plays the carillon for us. I don't think anybody last week mentioned it, but that Earth Day celebration here in town the week before last was quite good. And I want to thank and congratulate John Apria and Katie Neal Rizzo and all those involved in the cleanup all around town, which resulted in, I think, like 178 bags of trash. Never would have guessed. Anyway, a lot of trash was picked up, and the actual festival itself was moved to the high school gym. That was great. All of the booths were filled, and a lot of people came to see it, even though we had to change the venue. So congratulations to them for doing such a great job. And let's see. Just one thing, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for this evening. I thought we had 4 really good meetings tonight. Police chief, fire chief, Impact Norwood, and especially my good friends, Mr. McDonough and Mr. McQuaid. I think they provided a lot of really solid, incisive data relative to the impact of an override. So thank you for scheduling that. Happy Mother's Day, Mom, and all the other moms, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. One thing I just want to touch on quickly is the state Ways and Means Committee just submitted a budget today of, I think, $42.7 billion. But included in that money is a lot of money earmarked, additional monies earmarked for schools and for municipal government. So they have until Friday to work that out and see what the details are going to be. But hopefully there might be more money coming from municipal governments, and schools across the state in the year to come. With that, I'll take a motion to
A
adjourn.
lot of that is already in our calculations. It's just a little bit more than the governor's, not a lot more than the governor's.
But they funded 100% of the circuit breaker number, which
Right.
they have
Right.
not done in
That's
the past,
important.
which is.
And every bit counts at this point in time.
Move to adjourn?
Second?
I have a motion to adjourn in a second. All opposed? I don't think so. That's unanimous. So we will be back next Tuesday at 7 PM, and we'll see you then. Thank you.